Today, we're diving into part of resilience that, frankly, we don't really talk very much about, and we need to. Most people know me for analyzing currency systems and economic cycles, that and helping people protect their financial future, which is critically important. But the truth is, no amount of gold or silver can replace strong communities, clear communication, and frankly, emotional strength. These are things we really need today because we're living through what I would call a systemic shift. And that doesn't just affect our money, it affects our relationships, our workplaces, and our sense of connection with each other. And that's why I'm so excited to have Mimi Nicklin here with us. I met her at the Nomad Capitalist in Malaysia, and she is a global voice for empathy and the founder of Empathy Everywhere. She's built her career helping people reconnect in their teams, their families, and their leadership. And at a time when disconnection is skyrocketing, how important is this? Mimi, thank you so much for being here today.
Hello.
Mimi, it's so good to see you. How are you?
Oh my gosh, look how beautiful you look. You're like a vision of sunshine.
Well, I have to be
Oh,
a vision and sunshine because I am talking to you today.
oh, good answer. Very good answer.
Oh, no, it's true. And before we start, why are you
Mm.
doing what you're doing?
I laugh because people ask me every day, they're like, why do you do this? I think that really, Lynette, this was I don't know, my purpose. This is where I was meant to be because it very much found me by accident. I didn't go out to become an empathy advocate or an author or any of these things. Um, but today I do believe that I think everyone has different beliefs about their journey in life and where they're meant to be. But I feel so much in flow now, in momentum that I'm absolutely sure that I was always supposed to do this work, that it was just everything else was training, right,
Right.
to get me here. So I do believe that very deeply. But why do I do it? Because exactly to your point, I truly believe that people need it.
Mhm.
So, when you talk to entrepreneurs or founders or people in the media about why they do what they do, many people might say, well, I do it because I want to help people, or I do it because I want to make a difference. For me, I mean, it's part of that. But I also feel that it's just a need that our world has because we've never been as disconnected as we are now. And yet the science, our evolutionary reality, our common sense tells us we do better when we're together. And yet we seem pretty hell-bent on being apart most of the time. So every day there's another little reason, or sometimes very big reasons, depending on the news on the day, to get up and do it all again. So I do it because I think I was meant to do it, but I also do it because I truly believe there's a need for it. And if we can create more empathy in the world and reconnect us, our people, we can make a difference. And it's not a small difference, right? It's actually quite a huge difference. And it starts every day. So yeah, that's why I do it. Twofold, really.
Well, it was interesting because one of the things that you just said is that people seem hell bent on being divided. And
Mhm.
from a lot of the research that I've done, that's part of the plan. Because if people are separate, that means they're not having conversations. And if you're
Yes.
not having conversations with those people around you or people in your community, then it's easier to divide and conquer.
Well, maybe, perhaps, but how sad that is.
It's extraordinarily sad, and that's why I wanted you to come on the show because what you do, you're giving me chills right now, but it's so no, it's so critically important. And this was a lesson that I recently learned in September 2023 when I was in Australia. And all of a sudden, I
Mm.
realized what I really needed to be talking about to people was community and bringing community together, which flows into what you're talking about.
Yes, absolutely. And community is a huge part of it. I think that there's kind of an arc really where loneliness is on one end and community is on the other. This only came to my mind now. I never said this before, but perhaps empathy is that kind of path between the two, because we've never been as lonely as we are now. So 52% of the world today is lonely. And when you, right? And when you realize,
In so many ways, that sounds crazy
it's
because we
crazy.
have all of these tools for communication.
I know. I know. And I read another piece of data which I often use on stage, which is that 330 million people don't have a single friend.
What?
I know, not a single friend. So that loneliness is such a huge burden on us, because you realize that it's not about being alone, because we're very rarely alone, online, in the real world, wherever, in traffic, on the metro. We're very rarely alone, even when you're on the highway, right? You're surrounded by other people in some form. Loneliness is a lack of connection. So you can be lonely in a room full of people, or a stadium full of people, or a house full of your family. And many people don't recognize it. But on the other end of that spectrum is community, which is such a simple solve. And yet over the last few decades, so many of those communities have fallen apart. I mean, even, in the apartment building I'm in right now, I have a neighbor whose front door is opposite mine, and I don't know who she is, you know. She's actually quite new, so hopefully I will soon. But it's very easy for us, my point is, to live. I mean, we share a public door to our homes, and we don't yet know each other. So imagine when you amplify that on a big community point of view, like, do you know your neighbor? And if not, why not? So yeah, I think it's on a continuum, really.
That's a great question. So we can go there, but I also want to know, since yeah, you make a really good point that we're rarely ever alone. So you can be lonely inside
Yeah,
of your family
can.
and not
So
even
many people
realize
are.
it.
They don't realize.
What?
They don't realize, particularly men. Sorry to sort of jump in there, Lynette, but
Oh, please.
particularly men, they and I often say this to them, and you can kind of see it go across their face, that most of you don't know that it's loneliness that you feel, right? Because we get into this routine, and life is so fast and stress is so high, that we kind of just carry on that mill, as it were. And you know that you don't feel great,
Mhm.
right? But you're busy, especially men, not only men, but especially men in the professional world. They have such responsibility and such pressure on them, that to actually stop and think, do I have any friends anymore? I mean, I have colleagues, and maybe I know my mates from high school and we get together to watch the game, but do we actually have anything in common 35 years later? So you have to stop to ask those questions, because to solve the loneliness takes intention.
Mhm.
You have to get up in the morning, like I've done all the way over here in Asia, and come and see Lynette and say, I'm going to make an effort this morning to connect with someone on the other side of the world. I could be making breakfast for my daughter or walking the dog on my own, but my choice is to be with you.
I
So
appreciate
it's a
that.
choice. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But it's a choice. It's a choice. We all have to make those choices.
So how would somebody that might be feeling like they know they're not exactly happy, but
Mm,
what could they do to recognize that it's loneliness so that then they have the ability to make that choice? Because you
mm.
don't know what you don't know that you need to know.
That's a good sentence. You don't know what you don't know that you need to know. I think that I talk a lot about presence and also pace of life, speed of life.
Mm.
You can only get to know yourself, and I call that self-empathy. And self-empathy is a slightly lesser known concept, I feel, in the world. We hear a lot about self-awareness, self-confidence, self-care. Those things have trended in, I don't know, the magazines, right? And the blogs and Instagram. Self-empathy is the ability to understand yourself, right? But you can only do that if you are with yourself. I can't really understand myself running from, the office kitchen to the boardroom to the bus, right? Because there's too much else going on. So it's really about being able to listen first to yourself in this case, and in many cases to others, to be able to slow down enough to listen What is it I'm feeling? Why am I feeling that? How am I spending my time? And because we have so much entertainment, wonderful entertainment accessible to us, like Netflix, right? I can fill the silence very easily, right? So I can run home from work, make my dinner, put on Netflix and watch 3 hours of whatever you're watching at the moment, right? Um, and actually actively not bother to understand how I'm feeling and just carry on. And again, particularly in men, it's not about only men, but I find with my clients it's more so there. So I think the first step is to slow down. And the second step is to find presence. You have to be present in that moment. And the way I tend to recommend people to do that, Lynette, is to write, literally with a pen. But of course, it can be on a keyboard, but to write to yourself, to find time in your week or month, doesn't have to be, all that often, to sit down and reflect. Some people call it journaling. I prefer to position it as letter writing, in this case, to yourself. And the way I would do that is I would write in the third person to myself. So, dear Mimi, and then I would write from Mimi. And what you find, even with people who do not want to do this exercise, I'll do it in a masterclass, and you can see these people like sitting looking at me like this. And I'm like, no, you have to try. But when they start, something magical happens in the room. The energy changes, and it takes them about 7 minutes normally. I'm talking about very corporate rooms. And at the end, of course, I don't ask them about what they wrote, but I will go around that room, very senior C-suite execs, and just say, how did it feel to write that letter? And it's amazing to hear what they say. They say, what, I had no idea, I had never reflected on how proud I am of myself. I didn't realize how much progress I've actually made. All these things come out because they slow down and were present. So there's a lot of awareness in there as well.
That's really interesting. And what is the importance of that awareness? How does this loneliness impact not just we might be depressed a little bit here or there, but we know that emotions, stress, sadness, everything has an impact on us on a whole bunch of different levels, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, on the very kind of macro level, according to the Surgeon General in the USA, to be chronically lonely, so lonely over time, is as dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
Yeah, big data. Um, so from a macro data point of view, from a population point of view, we're literally talking about survival, right? So our loneliness is killing us. When you look at all markers across the body, so blood glucose, blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, likelihood of type 2 diabetes, anything that's inflammatory, right? Which is anything from kind of asthma and eczema all the way to cancer, right? Anything that's inflammatory is heightened by that lack of connectivity to others because we're a pro-social species. We need to be together. We evolved to be in tribes, right? If you go back, to our ancestry, when we were tribal people living on the lands, we knew that if somebody leaves the tribe or got separated, only two outcomes were possible. Either they died or we did, depending on who they were. If they were the hunter-gatherer, the whole tribe might die, right? So we knew it. We always knew that to be together meant to survive, to thrive, to do well. So from like a whole of society point of view, it's extremely dangerous. All the way down to a very personal level, a very micro level that you said it might manifest in things like anxiety, in the worst cases, depression. We have nearly 400 million people today with an anxiety disorder. How did we, I mean, we did that to ourselves.
How did we, well, okay. So we did do it to ourselves, but
we did. We can't blame anyone else.
No, well, okay. Yes and no. And the reason why I say yes and no is because governments actually have, and the US government has a formal program called perception management. And part of
Hmm.
that program, if you read a lot of the documentation in the 1960s, when
Mm.
when they knew there was a run on the dollar, so they knew they were going to take the dollar off the gold standard, and they knew that
Yeah.
what that would do was create more inflation, and they knew what
Right.
that would do is force women out into the workforce, and therefore
Hmm.
they would not be there for their families,
Yeah.
which would then, I mean, I hate to say this because it's disgusting, but then the government could have more influence over the children. And I think that we've now some of that has recently been walked back by President Trump. And that's one thing I can applaud him for is
Mm.
to put choices back in parents' hands. But
Hmm.
if you look at the evolution, you know, it really was about breaking down that nuclear family. So, yes, we have choices, but these government agencies employ the most brilliant minds in the world on, you know, they might spend 2 minutes on policy and 5 hours on how they're going to spin it based upon how they want to nudge you,
Yeah, the narrative.
the
Yeah.
narrative. And so
Mm.
when you look at that, how does empathy, how can empathy work in these kind of very
Mm.
stressful economic times?
It has to. We have no choice. We have no choice, right? Because so we have lost 48% of our empathy. This is based on a study from the University of Michigan that they did over 30 years, obviously in the US. And the way they tracked that was they studied students going into university and coming out. And through a set of research questions and levers, they would track over time, over 30 years, how those students exiting college, university, felt in terms of social behaviors and connection to others. So, what that data shows us is that over 30 years, we lost nearly 50% of it. Now, 50% of a skill that we've just touched a little there on literally keeps us alive. Does it improve your relationships? Absolutely. Is it going to be beneficial at work? Are you more likely to get promoted if you're good at empathy? Yes, right? Are you more likely to stay married? Are you more likely to have a really good relationship with your children? Right? Absolutely on all of those things. But higher up that level, it helps us survive. It helps us heal from disease. So when they study in the healthcare system, people that have higher levels of empathy between the doctor and the patient heal better, survive more, have lower levels of pain. In the UK, the United Kingdom, and many countries now have ministers for loneliness, you know, people in the government whose responsibility it is on a social level to fix loneliness. And they did some work in the UK and they showed that in the aging population, and they have a public healthcare system in the UK, right? So anyone in Britain, if they're a British citizen, can get access to free healthcare.
Right.
But what the data shows, if they do not solve loneliness in the elderly, that by 2032, the healthcare system will collapse, finish, because they won't be able to carry the burden of the sick, the health challenge of the elderly due to loneliness. Because when all people, but in this case, older people, break a hip, for example, if they have a fall, what the data shows us is that they recover far more slowly, if at all, when they're isolated and alone. And that broken hip might now become something completely different, pneumonia, right? Because they were alone, because that old lady has no one to go home to. She has no purpose. She has no community. So I say we have no choice because we have no choice as a global society. And I think that the governments of the world, nearly everywhere, are beginning to see that because you see initiatives all over the place. I mean, this year in the United Arab Emirates, so Dubai's government every year has like a name for their year, like a theme for the year for the population. And this year the word is family. Last year it was community. So
Oh, that's very interesting. I did not
it's
know that.
interesting, right?
It's
So
very
the government creates a theme that helps everyone in society, from the bottom to the top, recognize where they're moving as a nation for that year. And then they spend money on initiatives to help families come together, to create spaces for families or communities to build that social cohesion. So the more forward-thinking governments of the world are there. There are loneliness ministers in Japan, in Denmark, in the UK, in Dubai, in Singapore. Singapore, this is amazing, Lynette, right? I know very little about financial incentives, but this one's interesting. The government financially incentivizes through tax young people to live near their parents. So if you buy a apartment that is within, I don't know what it is, maybe 7 miles or something of your parents, you get a tax break because the government knows it will be less burden on them if the families stay close together. Amazing, right?
That is, and so simple.
So simple.
And, because obviously I spend a lot of time helping and teaching people how to build financial resilience. You specialize in building that emotional resilience.
Yes.
So, in your view, what would be some emotional preparedness skills so that we can start to come back together? If we don't, like, I've not ever heard of a program like that here in the US, but I know we could certainly use it. So,
Mm.
what could some of those simple skill sets be to build that emotional resilience?
Mm. I think that all emotional resilience, and in fact, all social progress starts with listening. So
Mm.
the ability to listen first, the ability to walk into your societies, your workplaces, your offices, your family reunions with the mindset that I want to understand other people, which is what empathy is. Empathy is the ability to perspective take. And I think many people get that wrong, right? Many people think that empathy is a soft skill, it's an emotion like sympathy or compassion, which are very different things.
Right.
But empathy is simply the ability to understand. You'll see it used in organizations like the FBI or the army or hostage negotiation, really tough environments where these organizations have worked out that social progress, that human success and behavior change starts with understanding. If you want someone to do something differently or treat you differently, so we're talking about emotional resilience or better relationships, people are only going to listen to you
Yeah.
once you have listened to them.
Yeah.
So if there was one skill that I hope to teach actually to the whole world, but starting with America, it would be the ability to listen. We think we're doing it. Many of you listening to Lynette and I right now think you are listening, but for many of you, you're actually only hearing because perhaps your mind has wandered somewhere else, perhaps a work email has come in, or you've entered some traffic, or your son has started to speak to you in the car. You can hear my voice, but are you listening to it? The difference is passive versus active. To hear is a naturally occurring ability, assuming you have good hearing. If I take my teacup this morning and smash it, you can hear it. To listen is to gather data, to gather insight.
Mm-hmm.
And we become more resilient when we are connected to others because we do better together. So there are no relationships that will not be improved when you master the ability to listen first.
Yeah, I mean it seems so simple, but yet, and you're right, there is a big difference between hearing and listening.
Yeah. And people always say to me, like you exactly said, it seems so simple. And 5 years ago, when I started this work and people said that to me, I would think, oh, my work's really simple, maybe I'm not smart enough, right? And
No.
then what I learned was the fact that it's simple makes it powerful. These are not, it's not like I'm teaching a concept, like 7 steps to being a better CEO, right? What I'm doing is reminding people of a memory. You know how to do this. If I ask you, Lynette, let's try it. Okay, so if I say to Lynette, if nobody listens to you for the rest of the day, nobody listens to a word you have to say at the dinner you go to, no one listens to you this evening, how will you feel?
Well, I would be okay because I wouldn't know it.
But generally, if no one listens to you, how does it
Generally,
change your emotions?
Actually, for me, it would make me quite sad because of the message that I'm talking about and how hard I am trying to build a global community. So,
Mm,
yeah, it would make me feel irrelevant,
yeah,
unimportant,
irrelevant, sad,
right? Sad, absolutely, lonely.
and lonely, right?
And
When I ask
actually,
my audiences this, they can tell me in a second, like you. If you say to anyone, right, when nobody listens to you, how do you feel? You can ask her. My daughter's 8 years old. I can ask her. I can ask an 88-year-old or somebody in the middle. Everyone can give me an instant answer, and it is always something similar to yours. I would feel sad. I would feel alone. I would feel undervalued. I would feel like I don't matter. I would feel disrespected. We know. That's why I say this is not a concept, it's a memory. You just have to remember for a second how it feels when nobody pays you any attention, when nobody uses your name, when no one cares what you have to say. And then imagine how many of us at this 52% of loneliness are going through every day living that. Well, no wonder we have 400 million people with depression.
yeah,
So we know it, it is simple, but yet we're not doing it. So there is a need to go out there, meet people like you, and thank you for inviting me to tell more people and just help them shift their brain a bit and go, guys, are you listening? Are you sure?
and actually, it's really funny because I'm the youngest of seven. So
Oh,
nobody listened to me, right?
yeah.
Now, this is and I can think of, I mean, I have things have changed, but quite honestly, there were times when I would call them family to-dos, which would be family gatherings, and
Ah, yeah.
I hated them so much because I felt all the ways that we've been talking about: discounted, discarded, irrelevant,
Right.
not good. So why in the world would I want to be in that setting? I can even remember sometimes, couple times, where I had to breathe into a bag because I was hyperventilating before I had to go in and deal with all my family members. So I really, I mean, in many ways, that experience has helped me because I don't really care what anybody else says about me anymore, right?
Mm.
So they can leave nasty comments. They can come on the live and I just won't do anything that's bigoted. But if somebody wants to say something that is negative, put it up there, right? Because that doesn't bother me. But that's because I lived my whole life or most of my life until now. Obviously, it's very different, but I know exactly what you're talking about because you do feel alone and irrelevant if nobody put and not valued,
Mm.
right?
Not valid. And there's a difference, I think, as well between that confidence and resilience that you have clearly mastered, right? Because you've had time in your life to learn those skills and to be able to say, they tell me my content's rubbish. I don't care. It's my content, right? That takes time, especially as women, I think, to master those skills. There's that, which is, like I said, I see that as very resilient. It's confidence, it's experience. The other side of that is just not being heard at all. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not hearing your opinion on, financial resilience or
Right.
your most recent podcast, but just being heard. If you fell sick, God forbid, and had to stay in hospital sometime, and you're trying to talk to the nurses and tell them, I don't want that, and no one is listening, very quickly you'll be back hyperventilating into that panic, right? Because
Yeah.
the need to be heard, it doesn't mean you have to be agreed with, or
It doesn't.
judged positively. You just have to be recognized.
Right. Yeah, that's
So
really interesting.
yeah, really important work.
Do you see the difference between, the generations? Like I can look, what's been really interesting to me as a mom, and I have
Mm.
twin daughters,
Oh
and
wow.
watch it. Yeah, it is really wonderful. And they're great. But watching each decade and watching them evolve and learn empathy. I just had this, I
Mm.
shouldn't say this on air, but I will anyway, because she probably won't hear it. But
We have to hope now she's not listening.
No, well, she's not here now anyway, but no, I mean, I just recently had this issue with one of my daughters who it was almost like, you know how people are just so protective if they do something or they say something that they cannot look at their behavior and how that impacts other people, and they have absolutely no empathy. And
Mm.
she went through that with a period. That's another story. That's okay.
Mm.
But last week she started going down that rabbit hole again, but she had the ability, and now she's 44, so it's good. This is her decade to do that. But she actually said, "Why am I feeling like this?
Mm.
And what can I do about this?" So
Mm.
that was honestly the first time. I'm so proud of her. I really am. So that piece she can hear. But that was the first time that I've ever seen her look inside and ask that
Mm.
question of herself so that she could then she empathized with how I was feeling.
Mm.
Before that, she didn't
Uh,
care.
Well, it's funny. Mums often tell me that, they don't care. They do care, on the whole. Of course, there are some kids that don't. But I think on the whole, most children of parents, whether they're 4 or 14 or 44, they do care. But that relationship from a child to the parent, so many children, I don't know in your case, right? But so many children didn't learn these skills in childhood for various reasons.
Mhm.
Mainly because the parents at the time didn't know to teach their children because we have an
Right.
empathy deficit, right? So I said we've lost 50% of it. So we didn't teach them. And I'll tell you a story, Lynette. So when my little girl, I mentioned earlier, she's 8 years old, but when she was 2, she was in kindergarten, like, or primary school, playgroup. And I went to pick her up. And, when I got there, the teacher said to me, Mummy, can I speak to you? And I was like, oh no, what's she done? What's happened? And she said, I want to ask you, earlier today, Umi, that's her name, Umi was crying. And the teacher asked this little girl, my daughter, who's 2 years old, tiny little girl, Umi, why are you so sad? And this little girl looked up to her in her tears and said, I'm not sad, I'm frustrated. Right. And this teacher was like, you're 2. Like, how do you know that? So her question to me was, Mummy, how does she know that? How have you taught a 2-year-old the difference between emotions? Because she said, I've been a teacher for 20 years and I've never seen a child this little that can do that. I didn't know at the time I was doing it. I guess, as I said at the very beginning, this is just who I am. So for me, that relationship was very natural. And I was a single mum for a long time to her. So there was only her and I.
How
And that's just how I was with her. So she's extremely empathetic to me. And, God willing, she always will be because it is just who her and I are. We will walk through a park. And again, when she was very small, 2, 3 years old, she'll say to me, Mummy, why is that old man so sad? And I'd be like looking around the park, like, darling, who are you talking about? And she'll say, that man over there on the bench. She can see it in other people, but we practice it all the time.
that's
So,
it.
when she's frustrated in her 8 years, and I will say to her, but how do you think he feels? That boy at school that did that thing, why do you think he did that? Because she'll be in her little girl way, he's so mean and he's a bully and da, 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 all those things that kids say, to always try and bring her back to, but how do you think he might be feeling? Why did he behave like that? So for most children, their teachers, their parents, they don't teach them those skills when they're little. And then and I don't mean this in a bad way, but then we judge them when they don't have them when they get older. We
Right.
judge them in the workplace. We're like, why are all these Gen Zs so da da da? Well, guys, did you teach them these skills? So we have a lot of learning to do.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, definitely we need you. And I can't even begin to tell you how many times you've given me chills
Oh, thank
in,
you.
in this conversation because I mean, this is a really important skill set. I love
Mm.
traveling because you get to see things from a different vantage point.
Yeah.
And I think that that is critically important because I think we're all also completely global citizens.
Yes.
So it does, like, it was so interesting when, well, first we were in Malaysia, but then we went to Cambodia
Yeah.
and we spent like more time in Cambodia. And
Okay.
it was just, it was fascinating because honestly,
Mm.
that was the first time this trip to between Malaysia and Cambodia was the first time I ever went to a third world country. I need to
Mm.
go to more. How happy the people were was
Mm.
really interesting. When you come from, the US and what an advantage we've had, I think people are, going to learn different in the future, and that takes us to something else. But you know, people that are raised here, I mean, even people that have nothing have more than a
Mm.
lot of the people that we saw and talked to and encountered when we were traveling. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, there's a very high inflection point between people who live in community, back to the beginning of our conversation. So
Yes.
the collectivist societies versus the far more individualistic ones, which tend to be the West, right? So the US, Canada, Europe, Australia, where we live these very individualistic lifestyles, which have been fueled by consumption and consumerism over decades and decades and decades. Um, and as you said, and I live in Asia, I've lived in Asia for 20 years, across Asia, the Gulf, and Africa in that time. And you see it everywhere, Lynette. In this, I mean, we're talking about, I don't know how many, maybe 4 billion people in total, right? This entire part of the world. And I would make the judgment, the assumption, or just the stereotype maybe, but it is what I see every week, and I travel every week, is that people who live in collectivist communities, however poor they are financially, however little they have, are relatively happy. Would they like better sanitation? Would they like a better roof? Do they need more food? Absolutely. I'm not taking away from their hardship, but I'm just saying that the power of community does great things for our emotional well-being. Malaysia is a country where, so Malaysia is a predominantly Islamic country.
Mhm.
Um, and what you see here when you not only we have other religions too, but it's an Islamically led country. And that religion, like many religions, in fact, probably all, has a very big focus on coming together, right? Whether that's to eat, to pray, to celebrate, whatever it is. And you will see all the time here just tables of Malaysian families together and happy, right? They don't seem to they don't care about the surroundings. I don't think they particularly necessarily mind about the food. They just want to be together and they're happy. Whereas, if you go to a Western country, for example, at lunch break, where's everybody eating their lunch? Like a sandwich at their desk,
At the right.
maybe
Exactly.
on email, maybe on a quick Netflix moment with their headphones in. Here, you go to lunch break, the office is empty. No one is eating alone at their desk. They're downstairs with their friends or with, their colleagues in community together, listening to each other. So I resonate a lot with what you said about your trip here. You see genuine contentedness when
Yes.
people are together.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's timely too because I believe so strongly, and this is a lot of what I've been now pushing since I had that realization. I mean, I have
Mm,
a mantra, and community has always been part of my mantra, but I can't say that I really ever did anything about it or thought too much about it until that trip to Australia.
mm,
And that has changed my life. And part of
mm,
what I realize I need to do and what I work on and why I travel is to try and build a global community.
mm.
And I have to figure out, so maybe you can help me do this. Well, but this is just
Yeah.
our first conversation.
Yes.
Um, because what I'm trying to do is get sound money back in the system again so that governments and central banks cannot abuse their population and
Mm,
everybody's got a fair chance. I mean, gosh, I left these foam mattresses there. And you thought you would, I mean, they cost me $36 each. They were nothing to me, but you would have thought that I left our guide like the biggest, best gift in the world. He was so excited to be able to take those little foam mattresses home, to his family. But we have to come together in community on so many different levels, but it really is about survival. You
It is.
are 100% right about that on
Mm.
a whole bunch of different levels. And if we're looking at these generations and going, oh, those millennials or those Gen Zers or whatever, what can we do to bridge that? Because quite honestly, in my personal quest to get sound money back in the system, it's not old people like me that are going to do that. It's really the younger generation that realizes the danger in what we've been taught to believe and the fact that it's a lie. And how can I, in my journey and when I'm working with them, and this is a collective I, because I
Mm.
constantly look in the mirror and go, if not me, who, and if not now, when? And that's something that
Yeah.
I challenge everybody to do. And that would absolutely flow in. How can we make this part of a growing movement?
Um, I think I think we have to change people on a soul level, energy level, heart level, right? What I mean by that is I find in the work that I do, of course, I have data, right? When I stand on stage, of course, there's data, and the corporate world needs data, and they should have it. And there's great data, right? So when we talk about businesses, 21% higher profit is probably everybody's favorite. When you run a business empathetically, when people feel they belong and they're connected, they work harder, they work longer hours out of choice, they're more motivated, it goes on.
Mhm.
The data is important, right? And it's good data. But actually, what you need to do is you need to move people to want to make a shift. And then you need to realize it's only incremental steps that we're asking people to do. So I have something called the empathy letters, Lynette, which is a do you remember pen pals back in like the
Yeah.
70s and 80s, right? So this is a bit like a pen pal letter that I send out every other week. And I'll tell you a bit of context and then I'll come back to the point here. But so a year ago, my father died just last December. Thank you. And after he died, my mum found a letter that his dad had written to his wife from the war, like a real letter, from wherever he was at war in World War II. So she told me about this and it settled in my mind. At the same time, people had been saying to me for probably 2 years, you need a newsletter, Mimi. And I was like, does anyone need another newsletter? Like, I'm not sure the world needs any more newsletters. But then one Friday in March last year, so about 8 months, 9 months ago, I was drinking a coffee and suddenly I thought, I'm going to write to them. Not a newsletter. I'm just going to write a letter. I'm going to write a letter in empathy and in connection and listening to whoever wants to read it. So I started to write. And what amazed me is that people started to write back from all around the world. And I didn't know them. Sometimes I do. Sometimes you might reply and I'm like, oh, it's Lynette. But often I don't know who they are. Sometimes I know their name because it's in their email or they sign. Sometimes they don't. And they would tell me, or they do tell me, amazing things about life and death and all kinds of things, illness, all kinds of amazing things. Sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's quite happy. And then in December, so just a few weeks ago, somebody asked me in the US, how many people read your letters? And I said, oh, I don't know. I'll go and have a look. I'm very right-brained, Lynette. I'm like, I see vision, I go ahead and do it. I never look at the metrics. So I went to look about 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and there are over 10,000 people reading this letter. And I nearly fell off my chair. I was like, who, what? I had No idea. I mean, I thought maybe there's like 100, that 10,000 people have come from somewhere to read a letter from a total stranger, and now they write back to me. So I had this moment when I was like, my golly, people are so desperate to be heard, to be seen, to get a letter from someone that is not pushing them or selling them or anything else, that now we're building, to your point, around a global group or community of people that don't know each other. Maybe I can connect them at some point by letter writing, right? This ability for someone to reflect to them, to listen, to care. And most of the time, what they say to me is something along the lines of, when I read your letter this morning, I felt optimistic. I felt happy, or, something positive, because the rest of their email is just a dearth of admin or depression or misery, right? Um, so now I've totally forgotten the point that I was talking about, except to say that people need connection.
Yeah.
People need to be reconnected in order for us to grow as nations, as people, to grow equality, which is what you're talking about. And you and I and nobody else, unless you're Bill Gates, can afford to fix everything at once.
Right.
But those incremental steps to just say hello to somebody, to listen first, to use their name, these things are things we can all do. And they really do change the world. It's not rhetoric, it's true.
So I do have to ask you, in the age of AI, and
Yes.
look, I can see good in technology and I can also see the danger in it.
Yes.
What is your feeling, not just around AI? I mean, I really have a lot of concerns, especially about the younger generation.
Mm.
What are your thoughts around that? How can you create emotional resilience so that you don't get, I don't know, what is it, sucked in or mesmerized, or, you're
Mm.
lonely and all of a sudden you can create this AI chat box that just, you
Fills
know,
the gap. Look, I think a couple of things. I think first of all, again, talking about my own journey as a mum and watching my daughter, I have a lot of hope that the young ones are not going to fall for any of it. Umi, my little girl, she doesn't know the difference between AI and, let's just say, digital stuff, right? She doesn't really know what AI is, but she calls it AI. And her belief is that pretty much anything digital is fake. In fact, what's hilarious, Lynette, is that she thinks, and her friends, and we didn't teach them this, and my husband is in marketing, right? So we're like a marketing family. She thinks every ad is a lie, right? So when the radio is on in the car, it's hilarious. And there's like an ad, I remember recently, an ad for vitamin C. And it said, take your vitamin C and survive this flu season or whatever. And she just says, no, don't buy it, mum, they're lying. And I was like, what? Why are they lying, babe? And she said, no, it's just AI. She doesn't know what AI is. But what she does know already at 8, and she lives a very innocent life here in Asia, is that there is a lot of fake, and that she needs to be able to distinguish the difference of when it's fake and when it's real. And sometimes if a scary thing happens in a cartoon or a movie, you can hear her say very quickly, but mummy, it's just fake, right? So I have a lot of hope, Lynette, that the new ones coming through, they won't fall into the traps that we are rightly worried about, right? Because they will know that that bot is a bot, right? So I have hope for them. What do I think about AI's role? I hope, because I'm an optimist, that actually in many ways it can help us reconnect. Because whilst there are very valid fears and risks around what these algorithms and machines can do, there is also the opportunity to reconnect at scale in ways that we never had before. So if you think about, let's say, if you think about a young woman in a village in Kenya, anywhere, but I just chose Kenya, who lives in a rural area and who wants to be a doctor. But her parents are farmers, and they've only ever been farmers for generations. So she has no knowledge of how to be a doctor, except she wants to do it. She's in a local school. Those teachers don't really know much about becoming a doctor either, because their village doesn't have many doctors. In history, she probably would have just stayed where she was and become another farmer, which is fine. But she never met her dream of being a doctor. But today, she could ask ChatGPT or any of these apps, right? Any of these bots, and say, if I want to be a doctor in this village, how might I do that? And that bot can say to her, well, did you know actually that there's a medical scholarship in a city just 3 hours away by bus? Well, can I do that? Well, yes, you actually can. And this is how. So it's a silly example, but it's an example that shows how these conversations can actually create connection. We need to be very aware of where the line is. But the honest truth is, Lynette, as we started this conversation, we are failing at human connection. We have lost 50% just under of our empathy. We have 400 million depressed people and 330 million with not a single friend. And we're doing a disastrous job of fixing it. Maybe AI will be better than us. And if so, in its field, in its space, I believe it can play a really positive role.
Well, I really hope that you are absolutely right, because as you were talking about also the older people, right? And how lonely they are, maybe it can help people, yeah, to your point, not feel as lonely and give them answers. And that's what we have to hope for. We have to hope for the best and prepare for the worst, but we need to really, more than anything, come together in community, and everybody brings what I think everybody's got a gift. Everybody brings the gift that they've been given, and that helps support the whole community. And, to your point, it really does start with listening. And
Yes, listen first.
it has never been more important, because we can't really afford to lose any more empathy, can we?
We can't. And I think I have that optimism that you're touching on there, that we can do better. And you mentioned the elderly, and in Japan, I recently saw a small robot. It's a little bit like an Alexa, but it kind of looks cuter. And it was designed for the elderly, knowing that in Japan, like many developed nations, they have a very lonely aging population. And what this little bot, very cute, I can't remember its name, but it has a very cute name. What it does is it learns about its owner, and it creates a relationship with him or her so that she feels less lonely. So when she comes home from playing bridge, this little bot will say, "Hi, Mimi, how was bridge today?" And she'll say, "Yeah, it was good." And they say, "Was Tom and Sarah there?" And she can say, "Yeah, yeah, it was. And actually, I won." "You won? What type of card did you play? And by the way, what are we having for dinner?" Right? Would it be better if that was her daughter? Obviously. But given the fact that her daughter is clearly not there, the fact that someone is at home just to say, "How was your game?" and "Well done, you won, and shall we make a chicken for dinner?" is better than her walking into a silent, empty, dark room. So I do have optimism. And you're right, we don't have a choice. So let's take the tools that we have and just hope that there are enough of us that want to use them for the good of the human race.
Wow. Well, that is really powerful. And I could not agree with you more, seriously. So, is there anything that you want to impart to our viewers, that, some message that you want to leave them with, maybe that we didn't cover today? Although there's a lot, we could talk for many hours, and I think this is, hopefully, I would like this to just be the first time.
Yes, no, let's talk for many hours. I think I need to fly to you for the next one. Um, I would say amongst all of these conversations, I think it is two things. I think the first is that we are more alike than we are different.
Mhm.
And the media, particularly in the West, will keep working to convince us otherwise. But in the end, the things that make us human, the things that bring us together are more than the things that make us different. You know, we all want to be loved. We all want a sense of adventure. We all want to grow. We all want to be connected. And I think we must remember that, right? That we're all more alike than we are different. And the second thing would be to summarize what we've touched on, which is that our ability to listen first will elevate and improve every relationship in your life. There is no goal that you have that won't be substantially elevated for you and the other person when you listen first. So that for me is a message that I really want to get out there for people. And like you said, make it simple. This is a memory and not a concept. You can do it. Leave this podcast. Look at the person that hands you a coffee in Starbucks today. Ask them how they are with eye contact. Use their name if they have a name badge, and then listen to their reply and just see what that does for them, but also for you. As humans, this is reciprocal. So we can make the world a better place. And it's only one moment of listening away.
Ugh, this is really, these are very wise words. And how
Thank
can
you.
people find you, though? We will put everything in the description below.
Well, my name is Mimi Nicklin, and if they put that in their search engine, they're going to find me. I'm on Instagram at Mimi Nicklin. I do a lot of work on LinkedIn at Mimi Nicklin. My YouTube is the same, and if they'd like to find the empathy letters and get a letter and write back to me, I would love that. And they can find them at my website, which is www.empathy.everywhere.co.
This has been so much fun. And I know that all of the viewers have learned so much from this. And this is critically important because we have to build that community. We have to do it locally so that we can create surety and create those relationships and grow on a personal level. And we have to do it globally so that, we can take our power back.
Yes. Yes, I love that. Let's do it.
Let's do it. I know we can. I mean, that is one thing that I heard when I was 4 years old, and I hear it today as well, which is, it is important to make a positive difference for a lot of people. And you absolutely do that.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for having me.
Oh, no, thank you so much. And to all of you, I think if we come together, we can make a difference. And until next we meet, please be safe out there. Bye-bye.